Okay, so congratulations, everyone. We'll cover this again, but we have completed ballot reconciliation, which is fantastic, and we can go ahead through the rest of the process around publishing an AU Core R1. So it's been a really big effort from most of the people who are on the line. I know some people have come in at different parts of the process and have given their time in the meetings, have given their time in the ballot comments. We've had people coming to the connectathons and the testing events who've commented also in chat, who've brought ideas to the process. And all of that has culminated in what I think is a really, really good first release of a set of minimal core data in terms of exchange. So it's been really, really exciting. And I think it's kind of a great start also to a second release. And you might have seen the email that came out just this morning announcing that what's been made available is the next view of AUCDI R2. And I'm sort of spoiling the agenda for today, but we've got some of the folks from that to come start taking us through that to set us up for an R2 kind of scoping set of discussion. But let me come right back and let's kick off today's meeting. And I'd like to start with the acknowledgement of country, and we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we all gather today. For me, that's the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators and healers. So our agenda today is usual business we always go through in terms of minutes, some of the updates and news. We're continuing the conversation on AFMM2. Then we're going to get a bit of a walkthrough from Nairi. Nairi and Heather should be on the line on AUCDI R2, where that's at, what the coming schedule is. I think maybe there's someone who needs to go on mute. No? Okay. And then moving into AU Core R2 scoping and having a look again at things like our scope drivers and principles and what are we bringing in and need to look at from downstream projects and other things, and then what's next. So that's today. So first up is what we always do, of course, which is approval of minutes. We're going to approve these separately. So let's go to the first one, which was back in August, and I'm just going through here. There is no outstanding feedback for this. It was sent round for review. So this is complete. It's got what was discussed, the recording. Does anyone need more time to review this? Okay, I'm not hearing anyone, so I'd be happy to entertain a motion for approval of these minutes.
I'm happy to motion, Marvin.
Thanks, Marvin. Is anyone happy to second?
I can second, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie. So now I'll put up our poll to approve those minutes. Okay, you should see coming up on your screen for approval of minutes of the previous meeting. If you didn't attend that meeting, feel free to abstain. And we're just getting the votes in now. And so still quite a few more people on the line, I think, than we've got the voting. If you have dialed in, you can either call out what your vote is, affirmative, negative, or abstain. Okay, majority of participants, I'm going to count that down now in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll and I'll share the results.
+1 for myself as affirmative.
Okay, thank you, Marvin. So with Marvin included, there are 14 who have voted to approve the minutes of the 31st of October. There are 0 negative and there are 19 abstain. So that motion has carried. The minutes have been passed. And now let's go to the other set of minutes, which is the one from the last meeting. So 14th of November, I'll go to those, which came out in the same email for people to review. And so these have, again, the attendees, the slides. We've got the list of minutes here with the decisions that have been carried through. Does anyone need more time to review these minutes? Hearing no one, is anyone happy to make a motion to approve these minutes?
I'm happy to make a motion, Landon.
Thanks, Landon. Would anybody like to second that?
Happy to second, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie. So I'll bring up a poll again for approval. Let's do that. Okay, you should see that coming up on your screen now for approval of the minutes of the 14th of November. Right, we've got the votes coming in thick and fast. About 60% of people have voted at this point. Okay, 70%, still a few more people to vote on last minute's meetings. So that's 14th of November. All right, I'm going to start counting that down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and I'll end that poll. So in this case, and sorry, Marvin, did you want to cast your vote?
+1 for Marvin.
Okay, for affirmative?
Sorry, yes, affirmative.
Okay, so with Marvin's vote, that is 18 affirmative, 0 negative, and 20 abstain. So that motion has carried as well. So the minutes of those meetings have passed. Apologies, I wasn't sharing, but I am now. So that motion is passed and those minutes are also approved. Okay, so let's get back to the slides. Updates and news. So we had a couple of questions over the last couple of days on the AU Core Scoping Workshop. So that is on the 12th of December. And there were a couple of people who asked a couple of questions because they had signed up for the Connectathon but wanted to attend the scoping workshop and hadn't emailed Spark to get a ticket to the scoping workshop. So these are separate. So I just thought it was worth calling out at this meeting. If you are coming to the Connectathon and you will be at the AU Core track, but you haven't signed up for the scoping workshop, please email sparked@csiro.au for tickets. There's probably an email I think that'll be coming out from Sparked at the end of this meeting to let you know that. But yep, please get onto that. Next point of business, nominations for AU Core TDG co-chairs. So next year in 2025, we'll be opening up some positions for technical design group co-chairs for AU Core. That should be hopefully early next year. We're just working through the moment with HL7 Australia and what that process would look like. And then we're going to put out the call for that. So I guess that will probably be an email, hopefully in January, to ask members of the community to nominate to be co-chairs, to join the existing co-chairs whose period continues over. But it's good to stagger these so that we have off years. And also an update on the terms of reference that were put out for eVote. So I'll hand over to you, Marvin, to take us through that. Let me know if you need me to click on anything.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. So we had the results from the terms of reference. So the terms of reference has been out for a long, long time. We had it since the, I don't know, 2023, I think it was. But we never actually voted on it. So it's gone through and passed. There was one negative vote against that, indicating, as you can see on the screen there, it doesn't accurately scope the work of AU Core versus AE request, and also some issues with the words that are used in that. Now, thing to note is that each year we're going to review the terms of reference. So we have feedback open now for terms of reference that will go into the 2025 review cycle. So if you can take a look at that and see if there are any things that you want changed or have an issue with, and then you can raise that and we will consider that when we look at the terms of reference again. But that was passed 14-1. So yep, that's up and running, and you should be able to go and see that within the Confluence site. Thanks, Danielle.
Okay, thanks, Marvin. Okay, next part of the update is finishing, I guess, off ballot for working standards. So yes, ballot reconciliation is complete, which is fantastic. And the IG team are hard at work putting in those changes. So that's really jumped up from our last meeting from a little bit below 50%, I think, up to 79%. So I can confirm that all the normative changes will be available for the snapshot that's being taken to the December Connectathon. We're looking to publish that, I think, at the beginning of next week. For those people coming to the Connectathon and who'll be in the AU Core track, that'll be walked through in tomorrow's track kickoff, which will also have a recording as well, so people can look at it. And when the ballot snapshot is published, I'll also put an announcement on chat.fire.org, so people who aren't coming to the Connectathon, you'll still be able to like grab it, download it, and know that's available. I think I'm not really sure. Aha, that's right. There is another thing to say about ballots. So finishing off where we are then for AU Core R1. So this morning, the ballot withdrawal announcement came out from HL7 Australia to say that with reconciliation complete, you can now go through for if you're a ballot voter and withdraw your ballot vote. We'd like you to do that if possible by the end of December 2024. So essentially really the end of this year. And if there's guidance on the HL7 AU site for that, and it's also in the email. If you have any questions about that, I think it's best to email Brett as the HL7 AU ballot manager for that, especially if you are looking to withdraw, but something's going wrong with JIRA. We had some issues at the end of the ballot cycle back in March when we did the ballot for comment, and we've worked with HL7 International Tooling to fix that. So we think it's fixed. But if you're running into any issues with how you're trying to process the JIRAs, I guess whether it's withdrawal or anything else, then please let Brett know so that he can work with HL7 International to make sure all of that's in place. The other parts then of R1 is to finish off AFMM2. Now, we talked about this and went through a series of profiles that we endorsed as AFMM2 ready in the last meeting. We're going to go through that this meeting. So what we've brought this meeting are the artifacts that have greater than 80% coverage, which is the AFMM2 requirement. And I'll talk through on the next slide, actually, I think, or when we get to that, on what we'll do looking at the others, including taking it to the Connectathon. So post all of that before we publish, what we need to do, and this happens for every specification, be that base, core, e-requesting, is when you go through publication, you need to do a final QA check. So we'll come back in our first meeting in January. So that's January 2020, January 23 is our first meeting back next year. And we'll do a final endorsement and confirmation of the QA.html, essentially saying that, yes, the IG is ready for publication in this group. And then that will go to the FIRE work group who meets the next week on the 29th of January to endorse that, yes, we've met all our requirements, and then publish. So we're still on track for January 31st is I think what we said for publication. But we will be talking about R1 again right just at the beginning of our work together next year. So that's the updates on AU Core R1. Let's move into FMM2. Right, so as I alluded to, we've been talking about FMM models since, I think it was May, was our first meeting on this, going from draft 0 to FMM1, out of the ballot for comment, and then out of the ballot for working standard, and through the testing period, we're now assessing what we can mark and say meets the criteria for AFMM2. And so that's the conversation we're having now, which is essentially saying that we have, through connectathons and through testing events and also through independent submission of testing results, we've got evidence to say that at least 3 independently developed systems have tested at least 80% of the core data elements based on scenarios. And we discussed the wording and agreement in our last meeting to acknowledge that AU Core places no limitations on those, that is not restricted to an EMR scenario, and those went into the minutes of last week that will also be carried forward around the nature of AU Core's scenarios. And so what I've done is I've updated this slide. So what we saw last week was green ticks, the dark green on everything that had 100%. We really only looked at the profiles, and we had orange where we had less than 100. And I've gone through and done the check now on where we've got greater than 80, but less than 100, and marked those in light green. And essentially that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about the profiles that are light green, so that's medication request, smoking status, and blood pressure. And then also looking at the non-profile artifacts, so that's the capability statements, requester, responder, actor definitions, and the responder capability statement, to go through and mark for AFMM2. That does leave us with a number of items where we don't have 3 systems or greater for those elements. For the majority of these, we've actually got 2 systems or 1 system, and I'll go to that now. This is all captured and has been publicly available for a while on our FHIR, on the testing Confluence page. So this is going through like who's tested, how many systems of testing, which parts of the IG. We've got the really detailed spreadsheets here that are going through which systems on which date tested what things. And then you get to see the summaries that are being presented today. So we've already gone through in our last meeting and endorsed what's dark green up here for profiles, and we're now on those other aspects today. And there's also on this page where we actually want the additional testing desired. There's a list of those things on what we're looking for, and that we're going to target at the upcoming connectathon. So what I wanted to pose to this group is today, what we're going to go through and endorse is essentially those where we've already got the evidence. But what I'd like to do is out of the connectathon, go through those results, update our spreadsheets and update the evidence. And I'd also then like to put out an electronic vote out of the connectathon to say, here is the last set. And now we can actually mark this set based on the evidence from the connectathon to mark as AFMM2. Are there any objections to taking that approach? All right. So that's what we'll do. We'll go through what is marked in green that we haven't already discussed today. Then we'll go through and take it to the connectathon, add to the evidence, post that on the page, and send out an electronic vote to just confirm then what we've added to and where we're at now in terms of what can be marked as FMM2. All right, so let's go through those items. So what we now have is we have for medication request, for the responder capability statement, for smoking status and blood pressure, and for the actor definitions, they have been assessed as meeting the requirements for AFMM2, they all have greater than 80%. If we look at the page, they have specific percentages. And there's also the detailed evidence again behind that on who's tested what. So what I'll do here, that's the JIRA that has been proposed to this group. Let's go look at that, which essentially just says, yes, we've assessed it. We have the evidence for these. Let's mark these now as AFMM2. Are there any questions about what's been proposed here? Okay. So if everybody's comfortable with that and there are no questions or anything that you'd like to have for discussion, then I'd like to entertain a motion for approval that these artefacts are AFMM2.
I'll propose that, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. Would anybody like to second that?
I'll second that.
Oh, sorry, who was the first person there?
It's Josh. I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Josh. So now I will bring up the meeting poll for that. Oops. Poll. Okay, it seems I'm already sharing a poll. I'm having an issue. Stop sharing. Apologies for that. Okay, that's the correct one. So that is launching the vote for the current motion to mark those artefacts as AFMM2. Okay, we've got over 50% of people voted.
Plus one affirmative for Marvin.
Thanks, Marvin. All right, over 70%. I'll just give it I'll start counting down now. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'll end that poll. I'll share the results. Okay, so including Marvin, there are 33 who have voted affirmative, 0 negative, and 10 abstain. So that motion has passed. We will mark those as AFMM2. All right, so coming back to this screen, the next content, we're going to move on to the AUCDI update. Before we do pass on just Nairi, so that means that also outside of the Connectathon, I'll email round any electronic vote and let you all know what the results from the Connectathon are in terms of relationship to testing coverage requirements. So you can expect to get that, hopefully, I think the week after the Connectathon, and that'll come out, which we can end before Christmas, basically. All right, so I'll hand over to you, Nairi. Just let me know next slide when you want me to move on. No, if you're speaking, I can't hear you.
I don't think she's on the call, Danielle.
She is. Well,
No,
there's a
she
Nairi
is. I
on the
can see
call.
her.
We can see her.
Good. Okay. She wasn't in the alphabetical list. Sorry.
That's okay.
Be higher up. Yeah, there she is.
Still having an issue hearing you, Nairi. We might need to say, Heather, are you
Still on mute.
okay to take some of this on?
Yeah, I think Nairi's got audio issues, doesn't she? Okay, I'll wing it.
Okay.
Because it looks
Awesome.
like she's not muted, so it's
Yeah.
probably the headset.
Yeah. Okay, so I was here as backup, but we will wing it and we will work our way through this. So this is where we are at the moment. You can see AUCDI R2 patient summary. The first big box in green has been released today. Most people who have, or everyone who's subscribed will have received an email earlier this morning that is going to be open for public comment until the 17th of January. So the main focus of this is that it is on patient summary. There's a second phase that is now starting to go through scoping. We were working on it in CDG last week. on the chronic disease management, and the two components will be pulled together and published at the end of June as AUCDI R2. So they're the three green boxes that you can see on that slide. Next one, please, Danielle. So we've started with core of the core, as we've done previously with AUCDI R1, keeping it as simple as possible, understanding what's currently there and how it's been done. We've done quite a lot of work to look at workflow, how much is structured, how much is sort of free text, and that's fed very much into what we've chosen to do. Next, please. The priorities for patient summaries, the ones with the stars are the ones that have come through for this. So you can see this is the slide that we've been showing all the way through from AUCDI R1 and also the International Patient Summary overlapping. So they're those red dotted boxes and the blue box. The stars are the ones that have been chosen for the priority for patient summary. We've got backlog entries of all of the other ones on the left-hand side, ethnicity, languages, etc. So it's I guess showing a progressive increase in scope over time. The scope from a point of view of widening the number of concepts, but also for some of the data groups, also increasing the level of detail. Next, please. So from the October CDG, so this was the last online one, we had a proposal for what was to go in. We wanted to actually include in that first box, procedure completed, vaccination administered, medication use summary, sex and gender from AUCDI R1. That was unchanged. So the majority agreed to that. There was also the addition of two changes, one for adverse reaction risk summary, so that we extended the scope of that to add the date and time of onset of first reaction and the severity of the reaction event. And for problem diagnosis summary, the third one, adding the date and time of onset, and which is of symptoms and signs as opposed to date and time of diagnosis or clinical recognition, but the date and time of resolution for when that's relevant as well. So these have been added. The other ones that have been included have been the last menstrual period, estimated date of delivery, and the pregnancy assertion. So they were agreed by the group, but the menstruation summary, which was not a whole menstruation summary, but trying to get a status to say if someone, particularly in the context of e-requesting whether someone's postmenopausal, there was some discussion and we decided to put that on the backlog and it needed some further teasing out. So last menstrual period, estimated date of delivery and pregnancy assertion are in, and that was something that we undertook coming out of the e-requesting data for interoperability, where we wanted to be able to consistently record pregnancy-related items. Next, please. Is Nairi here at this point? Has she managed to get on? Or yes?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yay!
Feel free to.
Sorry, I was just having an argument with my new headset that I couldn't get working, but I was talking to you just in my own space, so I apologise for that. Did you want me to keep talking, Heather?
Take over, please.
These two. Okay, so we've got the AUCDI Release 2 on the screen at the moment with the new content for patient summary. You can see in the data groups, we've got those extra elements that Heather just mentioned in the previous slide. So in probable diagnosis, we've got date, time and onset and date, time of resolution. In the adverse reaction summary in black, we've got the date, time of onset for first reaction and the severity of the reaction. And then we've also got those three extra data groups, which are the last menstrual period assertion, pregnancy assertion, and estimated date of delivery. Now, each of those ones, I'm just going to quickly go through a very brief definition of what those data elements are and what we'll be looking for and what we've described in the AUCDI Release 2 Word document that's gone out for public comment this morning. So in each of those, in the problem diagnosis, we're looking at the date, time of onset or resolution, which is a specific or approximate timing when symptoms or signs of the problem or diagnosis were first observed. And the date, time of resolution is a specific or approximate timing when a clinician asserts that the problem or diagnosis is completely or permanently resolved. So that's the first one. For adverse risk reaction risk summary, it's the specific or approximate timing of the first known occurrence of a reaction or to a substance, and the timing is a date time interval of duration. So we'd be looking at things like the date of when that first was, the patient first notified that, and the clinician can record it. And then the severity of reaction is a clinical evaluation of the overall severity of the reaction event, considering all manifestations. Now, in that, we've got 3 choices. So there's a mild, moderate, or severe reaction, and there are coded value sets that can be added into those data elements. For the last
before we move on, sorry, there's a hand up from Richard.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yep.
Severity. I guess severity is against each event or each manifestation rather than an overall thing. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's correct, yeah.
So there are, what you're not seeing in the dot points there is a potentially repeating reaction event, manifestations per event, and the severity of the overall reaction for each event. So it's not it's not a severity of the propensity for the reaction, that criticality notion. So it's quite different to that. Okay, good. It's just that you have a hierarchical dots in one of the other boxes, but not in this one. Yeah. Don't get caught up in those. It's actually in the models inside inside AUCDI. You'll see the models and how that's actually laid out and intended to be interpreted.
Yeah. Are there any other questions before we move on? No. Okay. So the last menstrual period is a deliberate assertion or declaration, usually by a clinician, identifying the first day of the most recent menstrual cycle at a specific point in time. It's commonly used as the basis for clinical decision-making. And the purpose of this data element or data group is to record the information about the first day of the most recent menstrual cycle for the individual. So in that particular data group, we've got date of onset, which is the date of onset of the menstrual bleeding, the date and time, the certainty, which is the level of certainty around the date the onset is accurate. So there's 2 choices there, as a certain or uncertain, and then the date of assertion. So the date when the last menstrual period assertion was actually made by the clinician.
And Richard?
Sorry?
So this is an assertion by a clinician of something that the clinician has typically not observed. Is that right? It just seems to be an interesting concept to have it explicitly an assertion by a clinician when it's an assertion by a clinician of an event the clinician has not observed.
I guess it's probably it's interpreting to the best of the clinician's knowledge, like if they're assessing a patient at that point in time.
Richard, it's when you're trying to say that somebody is so many weeks pregnant, you actually do go through the process of saying, when was your last cycle, how frequent, how regular they are, all those kinds of things. The assertion is the notion that we're using this as the basis for other decision making, including decision support. So from that point of view, within the electronic health record, it is an assertion by the clinician. The record of a date of onset in a personal health record or something is not an assertion made by the woman themselves necessarily, but this is the purpose of it. It's the same way as the pregnancy assertion. This is saying at this point in time we are making a definitive statement to the best of our knowledge. This is the correct information, because this will be used for other purposes, secondary use, clinical decision support, AI, whatever we need to do in the record further.
Okay, yep. I just wanting to highlight that interesting aspect of the way our medical system works.
Well, that's why it's called specifically assertion rather than just some kind of observation that's just noted. It's a different thing here for that very purpose. I think there's a comment too in the
yeah, there's some questions in the chat, Heather, from Andy. Did you want me to go through those now, or do you want me to keep moving in the interest of time?
Answer them now, because it's about this particular.
It is, yep. So Andy's one is related to assertion as well, which is, should we not have an asserter And is that an admin or technical issue?
So from the point of view of AUCDI, we are not trying to determine how things are recorded in systems from the point of view of the record keeping, etc. So for every single data element, you would assume that there would be an author or an asserter, etc., and that kind of stuff. The effectively reference model things that would be done the same way for every bit of data is assumed to be done. We're talking about the clinical information here within the health record, and so the date of assertion is important to know how recent it was.
Thanks, Heather. I think we can move to the next data group.
Okay.
Sorry, just before you move on, with regards to pregnancy assertion, I sort of very quickly put a question in there. Are you going to make the pregnancy assertion mandatory?
No. But this is the capacity, not so much to say, it's not so important to say someone's pregnant. The context is in situations, again, for decision support, AI, sending requests of when you want to say they're not pregnant. And this has been a large discussion that's been happening over the last couple of months around the medical legal implications of asserting that someone is not pregnant more so than somebody is pregnant, especially if it's incorrect or out of date, if a message gets sent to a lab, etc., and it gets interpreted incorrectly. It's currently in IPS, there is someone pregnant, not pregnant? And my concern is that putting into a patient summary that someone is not pregnant is actually problematic. It's really only relevant at the time of assertion, the time that it's actually recorded. So that's why it's again recorded this way. It's not something that like someone is pregnant or not pregnant. I think that's not an easy thing for a clinician to safely say that they're not pregnant. That's why we're trying to do it this way, including the justification, especially for when you want to say that they're not pregnant, just in case there are teratogenic or other fetal effects afterwards may come back to cause problems.
Yeah, I understand that, but in the current climate, it's actually saying that someone is pregnant that could be more problematic than saying that they're not.
In what context, Jenny?
In the context that sometimes people can be prosecuted for pregnancy loss.
Well, we need to be able to record this somehow in records for clinical purposes. I think that kind of thing is something out of scope for this particular discussion, but I hear what you're saying, especially with what's happening overseas. We do need to be able to record this kind of information to be providing safe clinical care.
Can I think that sorry, Jenny.
I think you do need the patient's permission to do that. I don't think it should be automatic.
It is always done in that kind of way. It's not done in any way that's going to be mandatory or that's going to be shared. Obviously, that's all related to privacy, authorization, all sorts of things that go on behind it. This is just the information model, Jenny, about how best we represent the data. I think it's
now when pathology tests by default are going into a record, into the My Health record, and that potentially may be recorded on pathology. I think that's something that you may need to add in, that this is done with consent of the person. I think you need to put consent in there. It's really important.
I think it's the same for every bit of data, to be honest. It's not just about the pregnancy side of things, and your comment is appropriate for all of this kind of secondary use, sending of summaries, etc. But the scope of this discussion today is about the data and the data pattern to represent it correctly.
And Heather, can I ask you to provide to Jenny, in the use cases that Jenny is concerned about, the means by which she can provide the feedback into those use case discussions? For today's meeting, in terms of the AU Core project, which isn't about, which won't really cover off whether or not something is required for a particular use case, and that sits within those use case discussions. So I think this is really important feedback, and we need to make sure that that is captured within the use case discussions, because it isn't something that we'll action in this context.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, so I think Heather's provided a summary of the pregnancy assertion data group and data elements. So I'll skip now through to the estimated date of delivery summary. And the definition for that one is the estimated date of the delivery of an active pregnancy by one or more methods. And so the purpose of that data group is to record the estimated due date for a pregnancy calculated by an estimated pregnancy calculated or estimated by one or more methods. So in that data group, you can see EDD by cycle, which is the estimated delivery date.
Good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, sorry, someone's
I think Kathleen
from
Yep,
an
thank
onset
you.
of the last normal menstrual period using the Gale's rules. The second data element is the estimated date of delivery by ultrasound, which is the date estimated from gestation of a pregnancy ultrasound. And that includes data element to capture the date of the ultrasound and the gestation of the fetal parameters measured during the ultrasound scan in weeks or days. And then the last data element is the estimated date data and delivery date data group, which was when this was last updated. So we're capturing when that was last recorded. And if we move to the next slide, please, Danielle, you'll now see that this is the patient summary in context of the AUCDI release 2, which is actually iteration 1. You can see that in grey, we've got the other data groups that have already been that have already passed through the review and approval process for the AUCDI R1, so tobacco smoking summary, biomarkers, vital signs, and encounter for clinical context, and the other data groups that have been added and from patient summary to AUCDI release 2. So, and the next slide. So now we have the AUCDI release 2 patient summary is now available on the sparked.ciro.au website. You can download the document and have a read through those. We'd be really interested in hearing some of the thoughts and feedback that we might receive around some of the data groups, but also the data elements, the definitions, and the way the models are structured. So there are pictures in there of the actual data models, which you can review. And so we're looking at getting a completion of the Microsoft form, which is also available on the website. So you'd be downloading that Microsoft form to provide your feedback. And so what we're actually looking for is that generalized feedback on the way that the data is structured, specific feedback around each data group and each data element, and then an overall recommendation for each group. So that would be either accept or minor revisions, major revisions, reject or abstain. So the exciting piece of news is that, as Danielle said earlier, we've actually published that out this morning. So that's ready for review, and the closing date for feedback is the 17th of January. So there's a little bit of Christmas holiday homework for everyone. And we look forward to the comments and feedback.
Okay, thanks, Diary. I think I have one other question in relation to that. So with people providing through the comments and feedback on that, will there be a either an online or face-to-face CDG meeting coming up early in 2025 that will go through, I guess, some of the updates?
My understanding is yes. I'll just go quickly back to the release schedule. But what I might do is
Did you want me to go into this one?
Yeah. I think, see that one in the 22nd of Jan might be the one that we're looking at, but we'll wait to confirm that with Kylie, if that's okay.
Okay, thanks, Diary. Okay, so yep, feedback is out. So we're going to have a look through this. and the specification is out for us to go through and have a look and provide in the questions and the feedback about its inclusion and what it means as we start to go to look through this content, with the requested feedback date of 17th of January. And also it looks like there might be an online meeting shortly after that, which I guess we'll also get the updates and agenda closer to that date. So that is the AUCDI comment. I also encourage you to get in touch with Heather and with Nairi and with Kylin, and you can email sparked@csiro.au if you have questions or there are things that you want to go through or arrange in relation to the AUCDI R2 release. I know that we in the TDG will start to look at this in more detail and pull things up and consider what this means for us. So at that point, then I'll hand over, since we're about coming into the framing for AU Core R2, to Heath. Heath, did you want to share your screen, or did you want me to keep clicking through?
It might be easier if I do it.
All right, I will stop sharing.
I think, yes, that's my screen now. Okay, so this part of the call, we're just going to start doing some preparation for our scoping sessions going forward. To give you a bit of a sense of what we're looking at going, our timeframes more than anything. Obviously, we've got our one publication coming up in January. We're going to be doing we've got these downstream projects now that are going to make requests such as patient summary, or to add additional information or additional profiles and elements, etc., into AU Core. So this in blue, we've got the patient summary project sort of timelines that they're going to work through to a ballot of comment in around August, September in 2025. And then that for patient summary, similar with e-requesting. So to support those ballots, we will be targeting an AU Core R2 ballot update as well. And as we move into 2026, there is also a publication of the patient summary planned in the middle of 2026 there. So that's what we're looking for with timing of ballots. So what that actually means for the TDG is that we've got a target of an August sort of ballot. So because of publishing processes, we really need to be having our content pretty much done by the end of May. So we need June and July, June in particular around looking at testing like we did this June. So getting vendor testing feedback on that new content, and then we need July for publishing. So that really means from February to May, we've got about 8 TDG calls. Also in that time frame, we're planning to have 2 face-to-face meetings, one-day meetings, probably one in around February, March, and another one in about April, May. And then we've got our March Connectathon. So hopefully we've got some content that will be ready to be tested in that March Connectathon. And then we're going to actually do these Spark testing events like we did this year, leading up to the end of that ballot material, so that we can achieve our AFMM approvals for that ballot. And of course, July publishing preparation and approvals for that August ballot process. This is just really a reminder of the general principles for inclusion of elements and profiles in AU Core or resources. So this is documented in the page that's referenced at the bottom. and is in general. So basically we are taking our lead from the AUCDI, so the data elements that are defined in AUCDI. But as we were just having a discussion through that presentation from Heather and Nari, the contextual elements that are not being actually specified. So things like who is the attester and all those sorts of things. So that's what we call the context to these AUCDI concepts. So we need to look at those to support those sorts of use cases, making sure that we've got the right administrative data to go along with the clinical content that is defined by AUCDI. We're looking at current standards. And also we're looking at current use in Australia. So those systems that are in Australia that are applying these particular use cases, we're making sure that there's some common use and general agreement around that these are important elements to be implemented and exchanged between systems. So that's the second one, obviously, is the current exchange. And finally, the use cases. Are there enough breadth of use case, or is it very specific to a particular thing? So is this just relevant for e-requesting? If it is just relevant for e-requesting, then it's an e-requesting project issue. But if it's more than that, and as we've seen, pregnancy is the good example of that, where it's both e-requesting and patient summary. So that bubbles up to AU Core. And also we have different practice settings as well. So if it's only relevant potentially to primary care versus only relevant to admissions, then perhaps that's not sufficient breadth of applicability. So if we start to think about these in the concept of AU Core R2, then what are the scope drivers? So obviously those AUCDI specifications, both R1, so because there are some concepts in R1 that we don't yet support, plus these additional R2 items that are coming through in this patient summary draft. We're very interested in these downstream projects. So a patient summary and e-requesting, the two HL7 Australia projects that are underway currently, and hence are the core scope drivers of R2 AU Core. We're also interested in other use cases that are of community interest, but there needs to be enough community interest for those to be included as part of R2. So although we've got these downstream projects, there might be other things out there. And we've had, for example, someone raise a topic around the advent of AI and needing to ensure that we've got enough, I guess, provenance of data that is being generated by AI. Is there enough interest in that space that will, to be able to bring some of those work items into AUR2? And then we also always looking at other national and international IGs. They're giving us really, are they relevant in other areas? And hence probably, medicine is pretty much the same everywhere. The administrative side of medicine might be slightly different, but basically human beings are the same. So the clinical side of things is very much the same. So if someone else is thinking that this is very relevant, then we probably should be thinking about it too. But it's also prior knowledge. So we're looking to, leverage what others are already doing, and making sure that we are being consistent with the ways that other people are doing it. If there's no existing prior knowledge then around this, then we're kind of off in our own little world and potentially may deviate from the rest of the world in that particular case. Perhaps just let me know if there's any questions at this point. I'm not following the chat, so.
It's not related to this, Heath. We're having a great conversation about other things.
I'm glad that I've got your attention. Okay, so perhaps if we can now, by trying to summarize this, and we're on this particular slide here, this is basically an updated version of what our inclusion criteria were for R1 in the context of R2. So basically what we're taking those previous slides into this particular one. So when we start thinking about items that are definitely in scope for R2, maybe in scope for R2 because we're sitting on the fence around things, or it's a future, or just out of scope for AU Core, then we've got whether it's in AUCDI, so that's a pretty strong indicator, and it's also required for downstream projects or some high community interest. So that's slightly different to maybe, where perhaps it's one or the other. It may not be an AUCDI, but it's required for downstream HL7AU projects or some community, high community interest, or vice versa. It's in AUCDI, but not necessarily currently part of a downstream project. In addition to that, it's really important that we understand the timeframes, and that's why I basically gave you that indicator of what our timeframes are. We've only got 8 meetings, so can we get consensus within our R2 timeframes? And finally, that they're supported by US Core, IPS, IPA, and that's not a total list, but it is an indicator of what we're talking about with these kind of things. So what ends up in the future is, well, we work out that, okay, we can't do that within our time frame, or it's currently not supported by IPS or US Core or something along those lines. So whereas the one on the right is it's just not our business. Going back to what we're talking about with, this is very much an e-requesting problem. And the patient summary is an interesting one, because patient summary is actually a focus group of this TDG. So it is, I guess, somewhat our business, but perhaps still very much orientated to, these things will be in the IG more so than AU Core. So constraining.
Sorry, just there's a clinical focus group, but there isn't a technical focus group, just clarifying.
Yeah, project.
So there is a project, there is no noun subgroup.
So I would like to take any questions of this, because what we would like to do is to basically entertain a motion on these inclusion criteria. And as I said, it's very much based on R1 inclusion criteria, with really just taking into consideration the fact that we now have downstream projects and our timeframes for R2, and we have an R2 of AUCDI. So any questions before we?
Yes, we do have a head up.
Hi, just looking at that, it occurs to me that if some Australian only content comes up, then it will not be a definitely or a maybe, because it's not going to be supported by US Core.
Technically, if you read it that way. But I think that it's more, there needs to be some pretty good justification that it's, probably goes back to AU base. So a lot of our Australian specific data probably ends up in AU base more so. So if we take identifiers for an example,
but AU Core would be silent on it. So yeah, I think what it means is that this inclusion criteria are to be treated as guidance, not a rule. And that if somebody comes up, for instance, with a piece of Australian only content, which is not in AU CDI R1 or 2, then we might permit it, but it would be a case of these inclusion criteria are not strictly enforceable. They're more guidance.
I think
So
that
there I'll
basically,
make a point of order. Sorry, a point of order for this group is even if something met all of those things in the green column, it would still need to come through this group to be agreed. So I think that this must be understood as a reference. I'm not actually putting my opinion on whether or not it is the correct reference at this point, but as a co-chair of this group, I must confirm that it must always still be discussed, I guess, with reference to this inclusion criteria before being agreed to be in AU Core.
Thank you. Good point.
and just one comment as well, that basically these are in some order. So, you know, if it's in AUCDI, because it's required for clinical use in Australia, then it's probably got a higher, that particular criteria probably takes over the fact that it's not in US Core, for example.
Ruben?
Thanks, Danielle. I'm just interested to know how community interest is demonstrated and by which rules it'll be assessed as high or low.
I think it comes back to what Danielle just said. If there's enough interest within the TDG and there's enough contributors to that, progressing that particular interest, then if there's no objections by the TDG, we would certainly allow that interest group to pursue it.
All right, in that case, maybe we should say high interest from TDG members, because community looks very broad to me.
Yep, happy to firm that up, because that's, I guess, community. This community, I guess, is what that kind of meant, in my opinion anyway. But yep, we can tie.
So there's a proposed amendment to, which we'll just talk through in a second. So there's a proposed amendment to say TDG. Yes. Okay.
Yep.
And Andy?
Given the CDG has out of scope any information associated with administrative workflow or billing, that then implies that none of that can definitely be in scope, and it's all got to be at most a maybe. Is that intentional? And I guess also, I wonder if, I mean, I too read it as this is effectively completely dependent upon US Core and the IPS IPA. That if this isn't criteria, maybe we should just call it guidelines or something, rather than making this, because criteria sounds like if you don't meet the criteria, you know, it's out the door. So that would be a softer way of describing it. I also wonder whether this is, given you described this as AU Core criteria, inclusion criteria, and its direct reference to the IPS and IPA, is this more IPS patient summary criteria as opposed to AU Core criteria?
So it comes back to these. All right. So your first point about administrative stuff related to AUCDI, anything AUCDI data or data groups that require context is covered by that second line in this table. The reference to the other the US Core is more around the current standards, and as I in the other one, which was around basically that, where's it not working? The relevance and prior knowledge. So that prior knowledge is useful. So and that also relates to our timeframes. If we've got prior knowledge, then it's going to be a lot easier for us to get some agreement on something is going to be represented this way. Whereas if we're making up something from scratch because no one else has actually thought about this, then it's likely to take considerable effort for us to come up with that within our timeframes. happy with, I think we've got a couple of issues now around, or suggestions around guidance. And when we get to a motion, perhaps we can take those friendly amendments. And I'm not wedded to the word criteria. If that's too strong for people, I'm happy to go for guidelines. But I guess it really just comes down to how we want to assess things, and if we make this too soft as well, that's perhaps, but words.
Okay, thanks, Heath. Let's move to Heather.
Heath, I think you probably answered it, my question just after I put my hand up, but I'm looking at and supported in US Core, IPS, etc., and I'm just concerned that sometimes that might be in conflict with AUCDI, or there might be things that we don't think are appropriate coming out of that. So for clinically related things, I'd just like to reflect back on those who were in the TDG meeting last week, where it was made very clear that we need to be collaborating between TDG and CDG where there are issues around that to provide clarity from a clinical safety and governance point of view. So if there's something you really want to have out of US Core that's not in AUCDI, please come back to us and allow us to engage around that from the clinical safety point of view. Just reiterating that for the community in principle. I'm sure that will actually happen in practice, but it was quite a tough and deep discussion that went on for quite a long time, and we needed to kind of just go through that again just to remind ourselves that this collaboration needs to work very tightly together both ways.
Thanks, Heather.
I would like to provide comment on that, noting that I'm chair. So, Michael, is your comment in relation to that, to what Heather just raised, or would it be something different?
Yeah, no, it's
okay.
Yeah. So yeah, as Heather mentioned, we had quite the conversation on that in e-requesting last week in our workshop, and it was around the same inclusion criteria sort of slide. We had one of these for e-requesting. I think one of the key points is around the things that aren't in AUCDI. So the high community interest, the US Core, any of these things in the maybe, about their relationship back to the AUCDI and CDG, about how do they get fed back. So the TDG identifies high community interest. We want to do this thing. There's clinical context around that. How do we feed that back through the CDG and AUCDI? Like, does it need to, can the TDG go ahead of AUCDI with clinical content and leapfrog it? Or does it have to wait for AUCDI to catch up? Or we can do something in between. So I think there's some of the decisions. We're still trying to work through in e-requesting how we manage that. But it's the same problem here. If it's in AUCDI, it's easy, right? Yep, it's in. But it's the other things we want to bring in that we're having that discussion in e-requesting, trying to resolve as well.
Okay, so that's a process point about dealing with the yellow or the blue column, about how that gets operationalized rather than the criteria itself. Okay, and we'll take that note to consider at the time it gets raised, assuming it is not in AUCDI. Sounds good. Brett?
Yeah, just commenting on the US Core, IPS and IPA kind of, won't call them criteria, guideline. I think if something's in US Core, I think it already has shown usage and vendor support internationally as well. So I think it's really important for us to consider that as part of our deliberations. Like we need to reflect what we're doing with what US Core says in some detail, and we might decide to diverge for a reason, but I think we need to kind of take it from that perspective where we're trying to work on artifacts that exist already, and we've got to realize as well for international vendors, anyone that wants to go into the US market or come out of the US market to work with us, like that's a real big consideration. So we've got to kind of try and justify that, and we should probably be commenting more on US Core and what it is as well as part of that exercise, if there's real problems with the clinical nature of the content.
Thanks, Brett. Are there, okay, hang on, there's another hand up. Oh no, Brett, your hand is still raised. Before we move on from this, I think I wanted to, as the fire lead for Spark, add my opinion onto this one, that that in my view, I think it is incredibly helpful if the resulting technical design is in US Core IPS or IPA, from my opinion. I don't think it has to be an and, because I absolutely agree with Heather that we may diverge in Australia, but it is always a very useful technical point of reference to know which way the international standardization is, or something that's already heavily implemented in the US, so that we know we're diverging rather than just going, well, nobody has solved this yet. So it is really, really helpful for us in our timeframes to have had a well-established reference point, and to go look at what has been implemented as a reference implementation around the world and take lessons for that. But I agree that it doesn't mean that we adopt what has been done. Anyway, that's my statement, but in regards to that. So back to you, Heath.
Okay, so I think can I get some clarity around the change of wording from criteria to guidelines? Is that, can we get some consensus on that before we go to a motion? Is there any
do you mean to talk about, or have we already done this? I mean, I know this is now talking about inclusion criteria / guidelines, but then there's also a reference to inclusion principles. It's getting a little bit complicated with 3 different views of the same concept.
So there are inclusion principles that are overarching of AU Core, and this is specific to R2 inclusion. So there are principles that are not mentioned in this guideline, but such as the AUCDI context.
And these are a proper subset.
So the principles still apply as an overarching item. This is to how do we narrow down the scope for this particular release.
And so you're saying that these criteria are all compatible with the principles?
Correct.
Noting as a point of order, though, that everything still must be discussed and agreed through this technical design group. Green does not mean that it automatically goes in. We must confirm that something is appropriate.
Yeah, I think it's important to have some lens to assess stuff as we go through the motions of looking at each thing. So I think this is a useful tool to kind of prioritize.
I think that's a good tool for this TDG to determine its scope.
Yeah. So I think it's not, like Danny was saying, it's not an automatic, if you tick all the boxes, it's in. We have to, and we still, within the work, we need to prioritize, I guess, what happens first and next, in terms of anything that happens.
Which does beg the question, what is the practical kind of, the practical reality of the difference between definite maybe, given for both of them, you still got to go through a discussion. There's no, it's absolutely included, it's absolutely not included. You either need, you've got to be in one of those 2 columns to be on the table. So the actual, there's no, I can't see any difference in whichever entry path you take, except one might be a lower grade level of consensus. It should be in there, but at the end of the day, it's, it's in or out.
So is this a friendly amendment, Andy, to rename the word criteria to guidelines?
Yeah, I did that one before.
Okay, I think we had another friendly amendment from Ruben as well. Can you repeat that one, Ruben?
That community interest is changed to interest from TDG members.
Okay. So there are 2 friendly amendments. Are there additional ones? I think I saw in the chat that instead of US Core IPS and IPA, that in both green and yellow, that would be or IPA.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that too. So I agree with that.
So that's 3 friendly amendments at the moment. So that would read inclusion guidelines. It would be the change to TDG community, and it would be an or for US Core IPS or IPA. Are there additional friendly amendments?
So this is one I've been toying about mentioning, where we say downstream HL7 AU projects, which I completely agree with. I'm wondering if we need to consider other downstream projects in Australia of national significance, and obviously the agencies work on HIE and the directory spring to mind. Do we want to consider things like that?
I suspect that's probably where Heath was coming from with the words high community interest. But I think if this does, the friendly amendment is included to say TDG, that there is some attendant other aspect then.
I think it's important though that the community needs to present their interest at the TDG, because that's where the decision is going to get made. So I think, you know, you need to turn up if you have an interest and demonstrate that interest, and and come and lobby for it.
Yep. Okay.
And I would also argue that the timeframes issue is probably something that we need to be. I mean, I'm not to disregard it and not necessarily knowing where those other projects are up to, but are they likely to bring something to the TDG within those and be prioritized, given that we've got these other higher priority projects that the government has actually asked us to work on, and that probably are going to feed into those anyway.
I would like us to consider that in motion of an AU Core R2 scoping workshop, that we accept a nominal set of R2 inclusion guidelines, which seems to be what everyone is happy with, use and reflect on those during the R2 scoping workshop, and move to ratify or further refine out of that scoping workshop day. I know I can't make a motion, but I would suggest that that would probably be a good pathway forwards.
Yeah, so I think if I'm understanding Danielle correctly, we're basically looking for something that we can actually start with on the day, and having a motion on these sets of guidelines today gives us that, so we can hit the ground running when we get to, because we've only got half a day, so we need to not have this discussion again, I guess, to some extent, but we certainly not hard and fast. We can review it, but this would be our starting position on our guidelines for that day. So I would like to raise the motion with those 3 friendly amendments that we accept these inclusion guidelines.
Okay, so Heath has so motioned. Would anybody like to second that?
I would love
Marvin,
to
I'll
second.
second.
Oh, Marvin, let Marvin.
Okay, we'll let Marvin do it. Okay, so Marvin is second. Are there any other additional discussions or friendly amendment points to be made before I launch that poll? Okay, so what I will do is I will launch the poll to accept these with the friendly amendments noted, to take into the AU Core R2 scoping workshop. All right, so we've got about 60 people, 60% of people who have voted. So just watching that tick up, now 70%. All right, so we've got majority here. So I'm going to start counting down now from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll. Marvin, can I ask you to tell me your vote?
+1 for the affirmative.
Okay, thank you. So with +1 for the affirmative, that is 29 have voted affirmative, 0 voted negative, and 6 have voted abstain. So that motion has passed. So that will be taken into the AU Core R2 scoping workshop. And we'll also take that action that out of the scoping workshop, in which there isn't another online meeting in December, but we do have our first one back in January, that I think any further refinements agreed to on the day will be brought back to this group along with the results of the scoping workshop. Okay, back to you, Heath.
Okay. So in preparation for this scoping, I've gone through a lot of the AU Core JIRA issues, and there was a number of unresolved items that have been hanging around for quite some time, going back to August last year. Also some newer ones that are perhaps didn't get picked up by the ballot because people didn't quite do the second step in the ballot process of logging your issue. So there's a few here that I would like to consider for closure, and the co-chairs have reviewed those resolutions and have agreed to this 7 items to go to a block vote. So we're going to release this block vote today after this meeting for you to vote on these 7 issues as a block, and it will close on Friday the 6th of December. So I won't go through these any further.
Before you move on, Heath,
yeah.
Point of order here. First off is, yes, this is a proposal. Are there any objections to proposing via eVote a series of items for closure? Noting the following things. If your issue is included in here and you feel that it is in fact, it shouldn't be closed, you may comment on the page as per all eVotes and ask for it to be taken out of the block, and it will be. You can also refer items to Telecom. So you can mark that and say that this actually shouldn't be closed via eVote. We need to be talking about it, which will bring it through to the 23rd of January discussion, because that is our next virtual call. So that is the proposal here. Are there any objections to putting out an eVote that is suggesting that these can be cleaned up, essentially? Okay, I haven't heard any. So when this comes out again, please check if there's anything you're concerned about. We'll take those out of the block vote. You just need to comment on the page or fill out refer to Telecom. Thank you, Heath.
Okay, we don't have time for this, so I'll let you finish the how do I finish this? Okay, I think there's just one extra item here. How do we continue refining? I don't have much time to go through this in detail, but basically what we're going to be asking for downstream projects to do is create a JIRA issue, and email co-chairs so it can be added to the agenda, and then you can speak to that request at a TDG. So we've kind of talked about that through what we were talking about before. If you've got an item that is unrelated to a downstream project, that you are still welcome to add a JIRA issue, and it will be triaged through normal processes with co-chairs. And finally, there is a community interest, or sorry, TDG interest of use cases. We have an AU Core parking lot page where we would love you to put your details, and we've had it, for example, through an email, a very, very detailed proposal of some work, which that would be a classic example of basically either adding a section in that page or a subpage and providing all your justification for effectively a change or an enhancement to AU Core. So we've got our meeting in Melbourne on, do you want to take this one from here, Danielle?
Okay, sure. So closing up the meeting, what's next? So last session in 2024 is that AU Core R2 scoping workshop. So that is a half-day workshop in Melbourne that will be run on the first day of the Connectathon, actually, but you do need to email sparked@csiro.au for tickets. Whether you have a Connectathon ticket or not, that's not related, so please do so. We're going to go through that, and there is, I guess, work for people who are coming to that to bring what their requirements are. Feeding into that, the AU patient summary project will be hopefully feeding in requirements. They have a scoping workshop coming up before that. And also, I think we'll look to see if we get information from AUE requesting on if there is anything that they would like AU Core to undertake, whether that's in terms of new profiles or refinements through the R2 process. And then we'll start to look through other content, including the high priority work items. And those are the ones that people bring to this meeting. So please think about what it is that you want that are drivers for your use cases into this. Oh, well, there it is, the homework into this workshop. And we'll go through and then bring that back into our first call, which is the 23rd of January, is when that is, which will also discuss the results of the eVote that is coming out on proposing to close items. So I think that's maybe next slide, Heath, or is that it?
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, good.
So, I mean, basically there is this working backlog page that's hopefully still displaying on my screen.
Yes.
Yeah. So if this is looking at some of the Canada AU Core profiles that we're going to be considering in that first session, but then we start to move into some of the JIRA issues, which are deferred items and unresolved items. So we're looking for you to basically review this set of this backlog and bring what you think are the necessary ones to that discussion on the day. Again, very short time period. We've only really got 3 hours to get through all of that to come up with a scope, an agreed scope for R2 of AU Core. So please come prepared.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Other than that, the comms for this will come out. You'll also get the results from the Connectathon in terms of testing coverage and eVote, a suggestion of the things that we can close off in the eVote. And I think we hope to see you at the Connectathon and the scoping workshop. Otherwise, I'll see you folks back January 23, where we'll kick this off with the results from this year, along with the final look at the QA of R1 and talking about nominations, I think, for co-chairs for TDG. And I think that's the plan. So that's it. This is our last online meeting for 2024. All right. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you very much for all your work and coming to all the meetings this year. I think we're in a really good position, and let's have a look at what's coming up in our next series of activities as we go through them in December. So thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Happy New Year.